Yes, my friends, you read that correctly. Dragon Ball has officially turned into Tiny Toons. And the funny thing about this, guys, is a couple of weeks ago, I made a joke in jest talking about this, saying that one of the problems with turning Goku into a kid again is that you essentially can't take the show as serious because he's a kid. When Goku becomes a kid, this feels like you're watching Tiny Toons. And for anybody who doesn't know, it's basically when you're just watching the younger versions of the characters, and it's fun to have, you know, your laughs and stuff, but... And when I said that at the time, that we were being told that this was going to be called Dragon Ball Magic, I only knew that it was going to be Goku and the Supreme Kai that were going to be turning into kids. Little did I know that the entire Dragon Ball cast is turning into kids again, guys. And let's first start off with target audience, guys. This is clearly marketed towards younger folk. And it's one of the first times that I've ever really thought that Dragon Ball is a kid's show, because even though it's a shonen and it's marketed towards younger audiences, there are a lot of mature themes, especially if you go back with the original Dragon Ball and with Master Roshi and stuff, that even though there are kid-like elements in parts of Dragon Ball, there's a lot of mature, serious things that happen that don't really make it feel like it's for kids. And I feel like I speak for a lot of people when I say that one of the attractions about Dragon Ball growing up, specifically Dragon Ball Z, is that that was always the mature, serious show that we would watch on Toonami. Like, you know, you had Pokemon, which was fun, and then Yu-Gi-Oh!, which was fun too, but, you know, using pocket monsters and cards to fight against bad guys just doesn't have the same effect as super powerful guys that have the capability of destroying your planet, and you have to kill them, and if you don't, they're gonna kill you. Like, the stakes of Dragon Ball is what made it a much more mature, serious show, and Dragon Ball Z was basically the adult show for kids growing up. This is a direction that Dragon Ball has been teasing. There's always been chibi art in Dragon Ball, and if you've played Fighters and you go to the hub world, you would know that the models that you use to navigate the hub world are chibi design. So the idea for chibi has always been out there. But I feel like a lot of Dragon Ball fans will be in agreement that seeing the entire cast being zapped into children is definitely going to make you feel a little bit embarrassed to even talk about the fact that you're watching Dragon Ball Daima. Which, if I'm being honest, I feel like the name Dragon Ball Magic was even better than that because, you know, it's more universal. Dragon Ball Magica would feel like a little bit more marketable than Daima, but that's besides the point. From what we were reading, you know, the translation from Daima is not a real word, but it's essentially supposed to mean like Dragon Ball Evil, which is kind of funny because you turn everybody into kids and make it all cutesy, but then the show is called Dragon Ball Evil, and my first initial reaction to the title of the show was Daima sounds like Daimao, like Piccolo Daimao, Evil King Piccolo, so I kind of felt that that was the whole naming scheme, and I feel like just the name itself in Dragon Ball is not very marketable. And out of all of the characters that got turned into a kid, I feel like the absolute worst one to be turned into a kid again has to be Master Roshi, because the whole gimmick with Master Roshi is that he's an old man, and if you go with the original writing of the Dragon Ball manga, as Mike from Laughingstock Media and I explained before, Master Roshi was originally meant to be immortal as he gained his immortality from the immortal Phoenix. But when you look at later chapters when he's fighting against King Piccolo and he talks about the fact that I'm just as immortal as you, tough guy, with Tien, that's when the show kind of retconned that Roshi can be killed. But when you go back to Dragon Ball Super and you see the fact that Roshi's now taking herbs to extend his life, he's the immortal old master. That's the whole gimmick of Master Roshi. He's supposed to be an old guy, and the whole thing with Master Roshi is that he's a pervert. So if you try to keep his character in context of who he is, now this becomes a weird problem because you have a little kid Master Roshi that's a pervert to other little girls. Now you can argue that, well, maybe that's fine because they're all kids now, but then it's also weird because he's still the old Master Roshi mentality-wise. I'm not gonna lie to you, when I saw Oolong, you know, become Chibi Oolong, the first thing that came to my mind was Porky Pig, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that thought that. This is officially a kid's show. In terms of the actual animation, though, it looks absolutely beautiful, and the trailer was fantastically put together, where you see the whole timeline of every major release of Dragon Ball that came out year to year. And I feel like it really captured the essence of all of what we've gone through as Dragon Ball fans. But the problem is that when you put the icing on the cake, it's like, here's the new part. Everybody becomes a kid again. It's like, wait, so you went through all of those awesome things that we had in the past to get to this? But at the same time, though, despite the fact that this was underwhelming for the grand finale that we're gonna get in fall of 2024, we have to admit that there's a lot of curiosity about this, because, guys, this is such a completely different direction from what we could have expected as fans. I feel like a lot of fans are going to want to watch this show, despite the fact that it seems underwhelming at a glance, because of the fact that this is such a ridiculous shift in the show that it's going to drive the curiosity of the Dragon Ball fan base. Now, us OG Dragon Ball fans are clearly not the target audience anymore, but we love this franchise so much that we're gonna just consume everything, especially when you starve us for years of not giving us Dragon Ball Super, which brings us to another point. A lot of us have bashed Dragon Ball Super in the past, myself included. And Dragon Ball Super definitely has its fair share of issues, but I'm not gonna lie to you guys. For the first time in probably my entire life, I'm looking at Dragon Ball Super completely differently. There's a weird part of me that feels like we owe Dragon Ball Super an apology, because if Super had returned instead of this, I feel like fans would have been way more excited, because even though we would have had to have gone through a lot of arcs that we had already read for a while, the Moro arc and the Granola arc would have been fantastic, especially where this animation by far outshines the kindergarten type drawings that we were getting for some of the horrible episodes in earlier Dragon Ball Super. Now, obviously Dragon Ball Super got a lot better by the time we got to the Tournament of Power, and I felt like Dragon Ball Super would have been a beautiful refresh at a time like this. So overall, guys, in a lot of ways, it definitely feels like the Dragon Ball universe is effectively being reset. Now, whether or not you think that's a good thing, that's up to you. If you really wanted to just reboot Dragon Ball, just start the whole series over with better animation, and that would have been awesome. Like, a good example that would illustrate what Dragon Ball would look like if it was rebooted would be Path to Power. Path to Power had beautiful animation, an awesome story, and it was extremely well condensed to cover the major points of early Dragon Ball in a movie. And I feel like Path to Power is an awesome model for what Dragon Ball would look like if Dragon Ball itself was restarted. And because of the fact that fans love Dragon Ball, more specifically than they would Dragon Ball Magic, Dragon Ball Super, or Dragon Ball GT, it would have worked. But at the end of the day, I speak for all Dragon Ball fans when I say, we feel like we're not getting what we want. Because you sit down and you think to yourself, who were the bosses in Japan that sat around in a room and thought that this was a good idea? And more specifically, who gave the green light into this, especially considering the fact that Toriyama himself has been on the record that he likes his characters to grow up and age. So the fact that Toriyama signed off on this and has direct involvement just brings up a lot of questions about why. Like, why did you do this? What made you think of doing this? What was your inspiration for this? A lot of questions that Dragon Ball fans have on their minds right now. And while the future definitely looks bleak and dim, let's try to be positive and give this show a chance before it proves to us that it's hot garbage. Now, upon editing the audio of this video, I made another observation about Goten and Trunks. So if you look in the trailer, you'll see that for a very brief second, you can see baby Goten and baby Trunks in the background, which brings a question as to how the magic of how everybody becomes a kid again works. So the adults become kids, and then the young people become like babies. And we also see this too when we see Android 18, who's much younger, holding a baby Marin. Now, all of this is funny, guys, because of the fact that Dragon Ball Super basically delayed the aging of Goten and Trunks, where they clearly were older than different versions of themselves, but the show just kept holding them back from aging for whatever reason, and then they finally age in Dragon Ball Super Hero. But again, guess what? Right after we get Dragon Ball Magic, and then instead of seeing an older Goten and Trunks, what do we get? We see them turn into babies again, completely nullifying all of the growth that they eventually got in Dragon Ball Super.